literally no offense to anything. They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
This would have been a lot better if they, had a strong male along with her, a prince, if it wasn't about socialism, if they didn't remove the dwarves, if they had real dwarves.
Rachel Zegler, once hailed as a rising Hollywood star, suddenly found herself caught in a storm of drama after what many now call the Snow White disaster. The phrase sums up a mess of harsh backlash, bad test screenings, behind-the-scenes drama, and controversy so loud it nearly drowned out the entire live-action remake. Now, in a twist no one expected, rumors are swirling that Zegler blames none other than Peter Dinklage for making the chaos even worse.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarves. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the
call
dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures.
This new twist has kicked up a whole new wave of debate, adding even more heat to a story already packed with rumors and drama. How did things spiral this far out of control? What part did Peter Dinklage really play in all of it? And why is Rachel Zegler pointing fingers at him in the first place? The biggest question of all, does this blame game hint at something deeper going wrong with Hollywood's push to modernize classic fairy tales? Even before its release, the film was drowning in scandal after scandal.
You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group, you just erase that whole image.
Disney proudly announced plans to reinvent the classic Snow White for a new generation, promising to fix what it saw as outdated parts of the beloved 1937 animated film. First, fans were curious and even excited to see how the studio would bring a fresh twist to such an iconic story. Rachel Zegler landed the role of Snow White, a bold casting move that sparked both cheers and criticism from audiences across the board.
Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there.
Some fans praised the casting choice as a step toward making the iconic role more inclusive, while others grew uneasy, worried that Disney might stray too far from the original magic. Then came Peter Dinklage, stepping into the spotlight with strong concerns about how the 7 dwarfs might be portrayed, fearing they'd fall into outdated, harmful stereotypes. His comments hit a nerve, especially with those who believe Hollywood needs to tread carefully when representing groups that have often been mocked or reduced to cliches.
If the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the characters.
But Dinklage's remarks also sent shockwaves through Disney. The studio was suddenly stuck in a tough spot, torn between honoring a treasured classic and avoiding the trap of harmful stereotypes. The backlash exploded across social media, splitting fans into fiery camps. Some praised Dinklage for calling out potential issues, while others felt his criticism went too far, threatening to ruin a timeless fairy tale. Many argued that with the right approach, the story could still keep its magic and charm, without making fun of anyone.
Peter Dinklage destroyed Disney, and it could end up costing the company over $100 million.
Back then, Rachel Zegler stayed mostly silent, sparking speculation that she either didn't mind the controversy, or was legally gagged from saying a word. As production pushed forward, rumors started flying about frantic script rewrites. Insiders began whispering that the team was in full panic mode, scrambling to reshape the story in response to the backlash. Word was, the creative crew was totally divided, unsure whether to include the dwarfs at all or find a new way to make them fit without triggering even more outrage.
Disney has cast Rachel Zegler to play Snow White, which caused a lot of controversy because Zegler is Hispanic and the character is traditionally German.
More claims rolled in, suggesting that some of the rewrites were sparked by pure studio panic over Dinklage's outspoken criticism. Meanwhile, Zegler was reportedly stuck in the middle, trying to keep up with a story that kept changing right under her feet. As filming crept toward the finish line, reports of sloppy edits and a messy plot began to surface. Test audiences weren't impressed either. Early screenings were met with lukewarm reactions at best, with viewers calling the film confusing and all over the place.
That controversy is being compared to Halle Bailey's Little Mermaid, which did lose $50 million, making only $555 million in a budget of $250 million.
Viewers said some scenes felt like they were awkwardly crammed with modern messages, forced and unnatural, especially for a story as beloved and timeless as Snow White. That raised serious red flags. Behind the scenes, scenes, the tension was reportedly just as intense. Whispers suggested the creative team was divided, with some fighting to keep a more classic version of the tale, while others pushed hard for big, sweeping changes to align with today's values. Clash was real, and it was pulling the entire project in opposite directions.
Peter Dinklage comes into this as when Rachel Zegler was cast, he laughed at Disney saying it's fake progressivism. The reason being that Peter Dinklage, who does have acrodyplasia, finds the depiction of the Seven Dwarfs very offensive.
Rachel Zegler's name kept popping up in the middle of all the drama. After all, she was the face of the entire production. Whether things were going right or completely falling apart, it all started landing squarely on her shoulders. Then came the moment that set the internet buzzing. Rumors began flying that Zegler was deeply unhappy behind the scenes. Some claimed she was lashing out in frustration, while others insisted she had switched into full damage control mode, trying to keep her image from taking a hit.
Peter Dinklage said that Disney casting Rachel Zegler is their way to feel good about themselves while ignoring a much bigger problem.
Conflicting stories kept piling up, adding to the chaos. One bizarre rumor even suggested there could be legal trouble for Zegler, sparked by an alleged on-set confrontation. While no solid proof ever surfaced to back up that claim, the gossip machine never stopped, and it only made the production's reputation worse. Disney, desperate to turn things around, scrambled to shift gears and salvage whatever was left of the film's image.
Peter Dinklage was criticized by some actors with similar conditions, like Dylan Postl said Peter Dinklage was being selfish and that community needs more work.
But it seemed like every move Disney made only added fuel to the fire. Fans who usually back Disney's live-action remakes began to slam this one as a step too far, while critics jumped on the bandwagon, using the disaster as a prime example of how badly things can go when modernization is mishandled. As the film staggered closer to its release date, it was completely overshadowed by a storm of negativity.
There's now an effort in Hollywood to not cast little people and instead do things like cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa.
Meanwhile, Peter Dinklage's original comments lingered in the background, still shaping how people viewed the film's chances. Some expressed gratitude that Dinklage had sparked a much-needed conversation about the portrayal of the dwarfs, arguing that a major studio like Disney should be held accountable for its inclusivity. On the flip side, others accused him of making an already delicate situation even messier, complicating a balance that was already hard to maintain.
Rachel Zegler is supposed to play Snow White. She's Latina. It says, literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback that they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Some suggested that Dinklage's concerns had led to creative decisions that ultimately disrupted the film's flow and harmed its overall cohesiveness. As for Rachel Zegler, she wasn't immune to criticism either. As the lead, she was easy to blame for those who felt she was out of her depth or hadn't done enough to steady the ship. Soon enough, the term Snow White disaster became the catch-all phrase for everything that went wrong with the production.
Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but then you're still making that backwards story about seven dwarves living in a cave together. What the fuck are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
From the relentless negative press to the lackluster test screenings, once the term Snow White disaster took hold, it was like a shadow that couldn't be shaken off. Headlines screamed that Disney's latest Snow White was doomed, riddled with tension, and that the once-loved fairy tale had been ruined by too many ill-thought-out changes. Every time Zegler made a public appearance or posted on social media, the spotlight was on her, with people dissecting whether she was acknowledging the drama or gearing up to defend the film.
I mean, there's the easy joke of, well, we didn't see you on the soapbox, Peter. It's true. But
online fans were split into heated camps. Some argued it was all a big misunderstanding, holding out hope that the film would still be a hit, while others had already accepted that disappointment was inevitable. Amid all the chaos, rumors began swirling about how Disney might try to distance itself from the mess. Some fans even suggested that the studio could fast-track a new adaptation, one that would basically leave this troubled version in the dust.
It's this weird thing where he's saying, like, oh, it's bad that we're still doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he doesn't necessarily want that. But as little people actors, it's like, well, we kind of want to work. We kind of want...
Rumors began to swirl about a second Snow White adaptation, one with a fresh cast, a new director, and a completely different creative direction. That's when Jenna Ortega's name started trending as a fan-favorite pick for the iconic role. Fans imagined how someone with Ortega's impressive range, comedic timing, and emotional depth might bring something special to the character, especially if the script embraced modern tastes without feeling forced. The idea of Ortega stepping in for a reimagined Snow White sent waves of excitement through the fandom. But all of this chatter came on the heels of relentless negative press surrounding the Zegler version. And then things took an unexpected turn. Unverified sources began claiming that Zegler privately blamed Peter Dinklage for much of the mess. According to these rumors, Zegler believed that the backlash and subsequent script rewrites were directly linked to Dinklage's initial criticism about the dwarf's portrayal. It was rumored that Zegler had confided in close friends, explaining that key elements of the film were radically changed after the public uproar, which not only messed with the film's tone but also made her performance appear inconsistent. Whether or not Zegler's frustration was justified, the story spread like wildfire across the internet. Some of her supporters argued that her reaction was completely understandable, considering how the conversation about the dwarfs quickly ballooned into a sweeping critique of the entire film's approach.
That part, and if that's what's available, then that's what we'd like to do. But at the same time, I get what he's saying, because yeah, you're like, well, was it that bad? I go, yeah, because at the time, dwarves really didn't have any representation.
Supporters of Zegler argued that the negative spotlight unfairly overshadowed her work and that of the rest of the cast, casting the movie as a failure before it even had a chance to prove itself. But others fired back, saying it wasn't just the dwarf's portrayal that turned audiences off. They pointed to problems like jarring tonal shifts, an over-reliance on heavy-handed messaging, and the loss of the original fairy tale's magical charm. These critics claimed Dinklage's comments were just the spark, not the root cause of the film's downfall. Yet, the mere rumor that Zegler herself might have blamed him sent shockwaves through the debate. When industry insiders were asked for clarification, most just shrugged off the gossip, suggesting that while tensions were undoubtedly high, it was far too simplistic to point fingers at any one person. Still, the drama between Zegler and Dinklage kept gaining momentum. People online noted that Dinklage had long been known for challenging Hollywood's norms. His outspokenness on various issues was well documented. If he had stirred the pot, it wouldn't have been surprising for him to take a stand on such a sensitive subject. And if the creative team had overcompensated in response, that could easily snowball into a disaster that overshadowed everything else in the film. For those closely following the saga, the idea that Zegler might blame Dinklage didn't seem far-fetched at all.
Because right now there's more dwarves on this podcast than there are in the new Snow White movie. And that's probably due to Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
Me.
The film finally arrived, burdened by all the weight of its negative buildup. Reviews ranged from lukewarm to downright brutal, with many pointing out the same flaws highlighted in the test screenings. The story felt fractured, as if it couldn't decide whether to modernize or lean into nostalgia. Some even felt the portrayal of the dwarfs had become almost unrecognizable in the final cut, like the filmmakers couldn't decide whether to feature them, minimize them, or completely reinvent them. Zegler's performance earned mixed reviews. Some applauded her for giving it her all despite the messy script, while others argued she was miscast from the very beginning. Peter Dinklage remained strikingly silent during all of this, at least publicly. His silence fueled even more speculation, with some suggesting he was purposely distancing himself from the project, either out of respect for the cast or because he believed the final version had completely mishandled his concerns. Meanwhile, Zegler continued to face harsh scrutiny online. As rumors of her private frustrations swirled, fans and critics pored over every interview or social media post, searching for hidden messages or coded references to Dinklage. Were her subtle comments about creative differences aimed at him, or were they meant to criticize the broader studio machinery?
Or can we just say midgie? Okay. Midget, dwarf, they're out of work. They're replaced by CGI things.
Yes.
Like, this is just a perfect
Imagine
example.
that.
When there's
Thing
no...
1 and thing 12.
There's no guiding principle, just progress for the sake of progress, and you're just trying to weave around offense after.
Was Zegler trying to absolve herself of any blame, or was she simply mourning the fact that the production never found its footing? Despite all the drama, the film's release came and went, sparking a flurry of social media buzz but failing to meet Disney's lofty expectations, either critically or commercially. Word of the disaster spread quickly in Hollywood, reinforcing the idea that too many voices had pulled the story in opposing directions. Some industry analysts argued that the entire fiasco could have been avoided if the filmmakers had taken a more balanced approach, maybe by staying true to the original Snow White while making subtle, respectful updates. Instead, it seemed that once Peter Dinklage's comments went viral, the studio went into overdrive, trying to prove it was progressive and forward-thinking. According to these observers, that frantic scramble was the project's ultimate downfall. Not long after the film's lackluster reception, rumors rumors began circulating that Disney was indeed considering a second attempt at Snow White, a move that felt similar to how they had reimagined other franchises. The studio might have been hoping for a fresh start.
And someone goes like, hey, Seven Dwarfs is offensive to midgets. You're like, oh, okay, so let's just not employ any of them.
Yes, Peter Dinklage.
Fresh writers, a fresh director, and a fresh star. Jenna Ortega's name was back on the table, sparking renewed excitement about how a reimagined Snow White might perform. By this point, many fans had grown disheartened. They questioned whether Disney's relentless obsession with remaking its classics was doing more harm than good. Yet others still clung to hope, believing that with the right balance, a modern adaptation could still create a magical experience for today's audiences. Zegler wasn't the only one shouldering the weight of public doubt. The fiasco had cast a long shadow over Disney's entire live-action strategy. But even as the focus shifted, the conversation surrounding Zegler and Peter Dinklage's role in the debacle refused to die. Rumors swirled that Zegler had confided in friends, expressing frustration over the immense burden Dinklage's remarks had placed on her. She was reportedly upset not only by the sudden shifts in the storyline, but also by how these controversies had forced her to become the public face of a project being torn apart from all sides. While no solid evidence ever emerged to confirm these claims, the narrative was compelling enough to resonate with fans who saw how the initial dwarf controversy had overshadowed so much of the production. At this point, some fans tried to shift the blame elsewhere entirely.
With Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. Woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good luck back then.
Some fans pointed out that an actress of Zegler's caliber and visibility could have spoken out much earlier about the film's direction if she was truly dissatisfied. They argued that while Dinklage's comments were certainly provocative, they couldn't possibly be the sole reason for the film's alleged failures. After all, there were countless criticisms about pacing, characterization, thematic overload, and heavy-handed messaging, none of which had anything to do with how the dwarfs were portrayed. Still, the rumor that Zegler believed Dinklage's remarks set the production into a tailspin became the focal point for many, overshadowing these other valid concerns. For some, this made for a simpler narrative, a cause-and-effect story about how everything went wrong. Meanwhile, Disney stayed tight-lipped, refusing to confirm or deny any internal drama or blame games. Company stuck to its tried-and-true strategy of letting the public conversation burn itself out, hoping that future projects and announcements would soon take the spotlight. In time, the so-called Snow White disaster might fade into Hollywood lore as a cautionary tale about the risks of remaking classics. But with the persistent rumors that Zegler had directly blamed Peter Dinklage, this particular debacle was destined to remain firmly embedded in the public's imagination.
It doesn't need a prince to save her, and not surrounded by 7 weird people. Oh, okay, just CGI fictional goblins, I guess.
This wasn't just another story of a lackluster remake. It was a tale of deep creative and personal discord within a major studio production. Journalists who attempted to get comments from Zegler or Dinklage about the rumors hit nothing but silence or polite deflections. Perhaps both stars saw no strategic advantage in fueling the fire further. Dinklage supporters argued that he had simply done what many had praised him for in the past, speaking truth to power about Hollywood's issues with representation. From Zegler's side, if she truly did hold him responsible for sparking the studio's panic, it was an emotion better suited for private conversations than public headlines. Any public criticism of his comments would only reignite debates about sensitivity in storytelling and put her in an even more complicated, spotlighted position. As the dust finally settled and the film drifted out of daily headlines, the story of its troubled production continued to thrive in message boards, fan forums, and casual chats among film enthusiasts. The various elements of the fiasco, the challenges of modernizing a beloved fairy tale, balancing inclusivity with traditional elements, and the clash of creative visions, became reflective of the broader tensions shaking Hollywood's evolving landscape. The alleged fallout between Zegler and Dinklage turned into a symbol of the difficulties that arise when reimagining a classic in a world where every decision can spark heated debate.
And I get it, there's a difference between spoiling and whatever, but to go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they would have had better control over that.
Even those who defended the film's ambitious goals couldn't deny that the execution had faltered, bogged down by too many conflicting voices and a constant focus on public perception. In the months that followed, as other Disney projects rolled out on theaters or streaming platforms, comparisons to Snow White were inevitable. Articles regularly brought up the fiasco when speculating about how the studio might approach future remakes. Social media discussions used the film as a benchmark, a cautionary tale for how to handle or mishandle modernizing a classic. If a new project managed to balance modern elements without losing its fairy tale soul, people would say they learned from the Snow White disaster. But if a new film stumbled, critics would snap, "Here we go again, another fiasco in the making." The shadow of that troubled production loomed large, and for Rachel Zegler, it became an inescapable chapter in her early career. As for Peter Dinklage, it reinforced his standing as a powerful voice in the fight for representation in Hollywood, but also highlighted how quickly comments can snowball into massive controversy. Adding fuel to the fire were rumors that Disney insiders were deeply divided on whether to keep championing the film or quietly abandon it. Some suggested that the studio's marketing team made a half-hearted attempt to shift the narrative, promoting the film's inclusivity and empowerment. But by then, the damage was already done. Calling it a disaster had almost become automatic in media circles. Any rebranding efforts, if there were any, failed to resonate with critics and audiences who had already formed solid opinions based on leaked details, test screening reports, and the flood of controversies. For Zegler's fans, the idea that she blamed Peter Dinklage for starting it all was both fascinating and troubling. On one hand, they understood her desire to identify a root cause. On the other, they knew that the film's issues were far too complex to be pinned on any one person's remarks. There were script problems, tonal inconsistencies, and a deep uncertainty about how to update Snow White without alienating the film's nostalgic fanbase. It was easy to see how Zegler might have pointed to Dinklage as a scapegoat, but doing so likely oversimplified a much bigger issue. Still, the rumor persisted, partly because it mirrored a familiar pattern in Hollywood. When high-profile films fail under the weight of public expectation, the blame game isn't far behind. Perhaps Zegler, still new to the Hollywood spotlight, was blindsided by the scale of the backlash. Blaming Dinklage might have been an emotional, understandable reaction, even if it was never her official stance. But the internet, always craving scandalous revelations, latched onto the theory, adding it to the ever-evolving saga of a film that just couldn't seem to catch a break. Meanwhile, Peter Dinklage kept his focus on other projects, occasionally giving interviews about upcoming roles or reflecting on his distinguished career. If interviewers asked about Snow White, he simply sidestepped the question, maintaining his silence. Peter Dinklage, for his part, offered a measured statement on the importance of nuance in storytelling, showing no intention of reigniting the controversy. Whether he was aware of Rachel Zegler's rumored frustration was uncertain. Some speculated he might have heard about it but chose not to engage, while others suggested the rumor never reached him, overshadowed by the broader drama surrounding the film's disappointing reception. This fiasco also reignited debates about the future of Disney's live-action remake strategy. For years, the studio had leaned heavily on nostalgia, remaking animated classics with big-name stars and polished visual effects. Some of these films succeeded commercially despite mixed reviews, while others were criticized for being uninspired or forgettable. But Snow White was different. It was Disney's first animated feature from 1937, a cornerstone of the studio's identity. Tampering with that legacy created challenges that no marketing campaign or star-studded cast could easily navigate. Dinklage's critique forced Disney into a scramble, and if that scramble diluted the film's narrative, it underscored just how delicate the balance is when modernizing a beloved classic. Fans on online forums frequently debated the merits of Dinklage's initial concerns. Some praised him for drawing attention to an issue that might have otherwise been overlooked, while others argued that Disney should have anticipated such critiques and taken a more thoughtful approach instead of rushing into changes mid-production. For Zegler's supporters, any blame she may have placed on Dinklage was either dismissed as rumor or reframed as a natural response to the chaos of the production's collapse. Although Zegler never publicly confirmed these accusations, the mere suggestion kept the tabloids and social media buzzing for months. Looking back on the fiasco, it's clear that a variety of factors contributed to its outcome. Tensions over reworking fairy tale tropes, disagreements about tone, a frantic desire to modernize while holding on to tradition, and the usual high-stakes environment of a major studio film. The rumored clash between Zegler and Dinklage, whether real or exaggerated, served as a lightning rod, focusing attention on the film's biggest flaws: its lack of a coherent vision and its inability to blend the old with the new. Instead of gracefully balancing both, it lurched between attempts to honor the original and forced efforts to appeal to modern sensibilities. In time, the fiasco will likely be seen as a cautionary tale about the need for careful planning when updating iconic stories. It may also stand as a warning to actors about how external commentary can reshape a production, for better or worse. The rumors about Zegler blaming Dinklage are true. She may have learned this lesson the hard way. If not, it highlights the power of online speculation in shaping public perceptions of behind-the-scenes drama. Either way, the notion that Zegler singled out Dinklage for blame adds yet another layer to the saga, blending cultural debate, creative conflict, and personal frustrations into a story about how not to remake a classic. As the entertainment industry evolves, new controversies will emerge and old ones will fade. But Snow White's troubled remake will remain a key reference point in discussions about Disney's live-action approach and the complexities of updating classic tales. If Jenna Ortega or another actor steps into the role of Snow White, they will inevitably do so under the shadow of this fiasco, facing heightened scrutiny from fans wary of another misstep. The rumored blame Zegler placed on Dinklage, whether justified or not, will linger as a symbol of the delicate balance between progressive adaptation and flawed execution. The conversation surrounding Snow White extends beyond the clash of two high-profile actors. It's about the tension between legacy and modern values, audience expectations and corporate strategy, and how external discourse can derail an actor's performance and a film's potential. The iconic fairy tale deserved a more thoughtful, deliberate approach. Dating a classic tale for a new generation should have been a challenge embraced with creativity and care. Unfortunately, Disney's attempt with Snow White became mired in controversy, culminating in a film that many found disappointing. The resulting wave of rumors about blame being assigned in every direction only added to the production's troubled legacy. The alleged focus Rachel Zegler is said to have placed on Peter Dinklage highlights the frustrations that often emerge when creative visions clash with public commentary. It leaves many wondering how different things might have been had the film started with a unified purpose and an open dialogue about sensitive topics. For now, there's no simple resolution. Disney has presumably learned lessons from the fiasco, but only future projects will reveal if those lessons translate into more harmonious productions. Zegler has moved on to other roles, working to build a career unburdened by the cloud of a film that was burdened with an almost mythical level of negativity. Dinklage, meanwhile, continues advocating for nuanced portrayals in Hollywood, secure in his reputation as an actor unafraid to speak his mind. The rest of us, however, are left trying to piece together how such a high-profile adaptation went so off track. The rumor that Zegler blames Dinklage for the catastrophe is just one piece of that puzzle. Intriguing, plausible, and yet unconfirmed. It reflects a production that lost its way amidst a swirl of competing priorities and public pressures. In the end, the Snow White disaster stands as a reminder that no amount of brand recognition or nostalgic goodwill can guarantee a film's success. With a story as iconic as Snow White, any misstep is magnified 1,000-fold. The fiasco, laden with accusations, alleged blame, and frantic attempts to modernize, highlights the importance of a coherent vision from the outset, one that respects both the source material and the contemporary audience who will ultimately decide the film's fate. Whether or not Zegler truly blames Dinklage, the episode underscores the complexities of creative collaboration in an age where even one person's public comments can reverberate throughout an entire studio system. It also demonstrates that the best of intentions can yield a troubled final product if the process isn't managed with clarity and unity from start to finish.